they skipped their own grandson's funeral for a party. While Julia stood alone, burying her son, her family toasted champagne, danced, and smiled for pictures, like nothing had happened. But when her father suddenly passed away, everything changed. A single line in his will would turn the tables, forcing everyone to face the truth they'd tried to bury. This isn't just a story about grief, it's about justice, memory, and the quiet strength of a mother who refused to be erased. Stay with us until the end, you won't believe what she did with the inheritance. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. This is one story you'll carry with you. The day started like any other. I was in the kitchen, making breakfast, when the phone rang. It was the police. I remember the officer's voice trembling slightly as he said, "Ma'am, there's been an accident involving your son, Ethan." My knees buckled. I don't remember falling, but suddenly I was on the floor, the phone still clutched in my hand, my heart racing in a way I had never felt before. They told me he didn't make it. A drunk driver ran a red light. Ethan died instantly. Ethan was 17. He was everything to me. He had a quiet strength, always smiling, always reading. He wanted to be a writer. He used to say things like, "Words can build worlds, Mom." I used to laugh and roll my eyes, but I loved hearing him say it. That sentence echoed in my head as I sat alone in the hospital room, staring at a white sheet that covered the only person who truly saw me. I called my parents right away. My mother answered. Her voice was sharp, annoyed. "What is it, Julia?" I told her. Silence. Then, "That's terrible. We'll see what we can do." I hung up, feeling colder than before. I called my sister Emma next. She didn't pick up. The funeral was set for Saturday. I spent the next few days in a daze, choosing a coffin, a suit for him, writing an obituary. Every night, I sat in Ethan's room, surrounded by his things. Books. Sketches. Notes on a future that would never come. On Thursday, my parents texted me. A single line, "We won't be able to attend the funeral. Emma's engagement is on Saturday. The venue's already paid. We hope you understand." My hands shook as I read it. I stared at the screen, rereading it, hoping it would change. Emma's engagement party. A celebration. While I buried my son. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. Not then. The grief was so large, it had no shape. It didn't even feel like sadness, just silence. I sat alone that night in my dark kitchen. No one should ever have to bury their child. But to bury him while your own family laughs at a party, that's a kind of loneliness I wouldn't wish on anyone. Saturday arrived like a bad dream. The morning was gray and heavy. I woke up before the sun and stood by the window for a long time, watching the quiet street. I didn't hear from anyone in my family. No calls. No messages. Just silence. The kind that makes your chest feel hollow. At the funeral home, the staff whispered and moved gently, as if afraid to disturb my sorrow. A few of Ethan's friends came, 3 boys from his literature class, his old math teacher, and our neighbor Mrs. Harding, who brought a plate of muffins, saying, "I know food can't fix anything, but it's what I do." I smiled faintly and thanked her. The ceremony was small. Quiet. I stood at the front with trembling hands as I read a letter I had written to Ethan. I spoke about his love for stories, his gentle heart, his way of noticing the small, beautiful things in life. I told everyone how he once stopped in the middle of a storm just to admire the way the raindrops hit the sidewalk like piano notes. No one from my family was there. Not even a flower. I imagined Emma, in a bright room filled with balloons and music, laughing, smiling for photos, showing off her ring. Maybe my mother gave a toast. Maybe my father danced. And all the while, I stood beside a coffin. After the burial, I went back home and sat on the edge of Ethan's bed. It still smelled like him, cedarwood, old books, and a hint of the cologne I bought him last Christmas. I looked at his desk, still scattered with papers and half-finished poems. I picked one up and read, "Even the stars cry sometimes, but we still call them beautiful." That night, I received a video from a distant cousin. It was footage from Emma's engagement party. She wore a shimmering dress, and everyone was cheering as her fiancé kissed her hand. My mother's voice rang out in the background, saying, "This is the happiest day of our lives." I dropped the phone. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I wasn't just grieving my son anymore. I was grieving my family. The people who were supposed to hold me when I couldn't stand. The people who had chosen a party over a funeral. I didn't cry until the next morning. I sat on the kitchen floor, holding Ethan's favorite mug, and finally let the tears fall. Loud, shaking sobs that left me gasping. That was the moment something in me hardened. Something shifted. They had chosen to look away from my pain. So I would learn to live without them. The following weeks passed like fog. I moved through each day on autopilot, going to work because I didn't know what else to do. The halls of the high school where I taught felt colder, the lights too bright, the conversations around me too light. I smiled when I had to, nodded when someone said, "I'm so sorry," but I barely heard the words. Every night I came home and sat in Ethan's room. I'd read his journal entries, his unfinished short stories, the list he made of things I want to do before 25. He'd only crossed off 2, 1, learn to drive. 2, tell mom she's my hero. I stared at that second one for hours. I didn't hear from my family again. Not a call. Not even a text. My sister posted dozens of pictures from the engagement party on social media, smiling, surrounded by flowers and champagne. My parents commented on every one. "So proud. Our shining star." Not once did they mention Ethan. Not once did they ask how I was. At school, I overheard 2 teachers whispering in the break room. "Her family didn't show up for the funeral," one of them said. Can you believe that? I walked past them with my head held high, but something cracked inside. I had become a story. A lesson in what not to do. One Friday afternoon, I saw a student of mine, Leah, sitting alone in the library, crying quietly. I sat down next to her and asked what was wrong. She told me her brother was in the hospital, and no one at home seemed to care. Without thinking, I reached for her hand and said, "I care. You're not alone." And in that moment, I realized, I still had something to give. Even if my own family had forgotten me, I could still show others the compassion I never received. That night, I sat with a cup of tea and thought about the kind of woman I wanted to be. Strong. Wise. Open-hearted. Ethan had believed in kindness. I could still live by his values, even in grief. I started volunteering at a literacy center on Saturdays. It felt good. Meaningful. Slowly, the fog began to lift. I was building something again, not with bricks or money, but with time, with presence, with quiet joy. But just as I started to feel grounded again, the past came knocking. On a Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from a lawyer's office. A firm I recognized, my father's estate attorney. The voice on the line was calm and professional. "Miss Carter, we're reaching out regarding the passing of your father. There will be a formal reading of his will next week. You're named as one of the interested parties." I sat in silence. My father was gone. The man who didn't come to his grandson's funeral. Gone without a word. And suddenly, I was being pulled back into a world I had fought to leave behind. I stared at the phone long after the call ended. My father was dead. A man I had barely spoken to in nearly a year, whose absence at Ethan's funeral had broken something so deeply inside me that I never thought it would heal. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel much of anything, just a strange, hollow ache. Like someone had opened a door I had carefully sealed shut. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following Monday, at a law office in our hometown, the same town I had left behind after the funeral. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore the invitation, pretend none of it mattered. But a louder voice inside me whispered that it did. Maybe it wasn't about money or property. Maybe I just needed to look them in the eyes one last time. I took the train on Sunday. The ride was quiet, the landscape rolling by in a blur of green and gray. I tried to read but couldn't concentrate. I found myself replaying memories from my childhood, my father teaching me how to ride a bike, the sound of his laugh when I burned my first pancakes, how proud he looked when I got my teaching license. And then how that pride disappeared the day I told him I was keeping Ethan, even if the father didn't want to be involved. He never forgave me for choosing motherhood over what he called stability. I arrived at the town late in the evening and checked into a small motel. That night, I walked by our old house. The lights were off, the lawn unkept, the porch swing still. It looked like a home that had stopped breathing. I stood there for a moment, watching it from the sidewalk, and then turned away. The next morning, I walked into the attorney's office. It was a modest building, neat and quiet. I recognized the secretary. She used to give me peppermint candies when I'd come here with Dad as a kid. She nodded politely, not meeting my eyes. Inside the conference room, they were already there. My mother, sitting tall and expressionless. Emma, radiant in a pale blue dress, her engagement ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. Her fiancé sat beside her, smug and bored. No one said a word when I entered. I sat down across from them, my back straight, my hands folded. The air was thick with tension. I could feel Emma watching me, could sense my mother's discomfort. But I didn't flinch. The lawyer, Mr. Holloway, entered, carrying a brown envelope and a solemn expression. He greeted everyone, sat down, and cleared his throat. "This will be brief," he said. "Your father left a detailed and legally binding document. His instructions are clear." Emma leaned forward slightly, as if she already knew what was coming. "As per the will," Mr. Holloway continued, "all assets, including the family home, the hardware store, and remaining savings, are to be transferred to Emma Carter." I didn't react. My mother nodded slightly, and Emma gave a small smile. But then the lawyer paused. "However," he said, picking up a second page, "there is a conditional clause. And it changes everything." The room went still. Emma's smile froze. My mother leaned in, her eyebrows drawn. Even the fiancé shifted in his seat, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Mr. Holloway glanced at each of us before continuing, his voice steady and deliberate. "Your father included a clause regarding eligibility for inheritance," he said. "Specifically, it states that Emma Carter's right to inherit is entirely dependent upon her presence at the funeral of his grandson, Ethan Carter." I blinked. For a moment, I thought I misheard. Mr. Holloway went on, "If Emma failed to attend the funeral, all assets are to be redirected to Julia Carter. The decision, as written, is final and irrevocable." Emma's jaw dropped. "What? That's insane. He never said anything about this." Mr. Holloway raised his hand calmly. "Your father left a notarized statement dated 3 days after the funeral. It includes a written confirmation that he was aware Emma, as well as both parents, did not attend. He expresses regret and states that this clause is to honor the memory of his grandson, whom he says was treated as invisible by the very people who should have shown up." My heart pounded. I didn't expect this. I wasn't here for revenge. But hearing those words, that my father saw what happened, that he didn't ignore it, felt like a wound slowly being stitched shut. Emma stood up, her voice shaking. "This is a joke. He would never do that. He always said I was the responsible one. He trusted me to take care of everything." Mr. Holloway calmly slid a video file across the table. "There's a recorded message as well." He insisted it be played during this reading. He pressed a button on a small tablet, and my father's face appeared. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. Heavy-hearted. "If you're watching this," he said, "I'm already gone. Emma, Julia, if you're both here, then I need to say something I never said out loud. I made mistakes. I was hard on Julia, especially after Ethan was born. I thought I was protecting her. But in doing that, I pushed her away. And when Ethan died, I watched this family choose comfort over compassion. I can't undo what's been done. But I can make sure that my last decision reflects what should have mattered all along: presence, loyalty, and love. If you were not at that boy's funeral, you don't deserve a cent of what I've built. The screen went black. No one said anything. Emma was pale. My mother looked stunned. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I felt, not joy. Not victory. Just clarity. The weight in my chest lifted slightly. Not because I was about to receive money or property, but because someone had finally acknowledged the pain. I stood up slowly. I didn't come here for this, I said. But I'm not going to apologize for it either. As I walked out of the room, I realized something: justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes, it looks like being seen. Finally, I walked out of that office and into the late afternoon sun, unsure of what to feel. Relief? Closure? I wasn't sure yet. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I was drowning in silence. I felt grounded. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my suitcase. My hands were still shaking. My father's words echoed in my mind, not just what he said, but the way he said it. He had looked tired, but also sincere. I hadn't heard that tone from him in years. Maybe never. That night, I walked through the town alone. It was quiet, familiar but distant. I passed the high school football field where Ethan had once played one unforgettable game, even though he hated sports. He had only joined the team because one of his poems got turned into a halftime speech and the coach made him honor it by joining for a season. He'd laughed so much about it, said, "This is the price of fame, Mom." I smiled to myself in the dark. He would have hated all this, the drama, the inheritance, the fight. But he would have loved the truth being spoken out loud. That mattered to him more than anything. The next day, I met with Mr. Holloway again to handle the paperwork. The house, the store, and the savings, all of it was now legally mine. I could barely wrap my head around it. I wasn't rich by any means, but the value of the property and business meant I could live comfortably, even generously. It wasn't just money, it was freedom. A kind I hadn't felt since becoming a single mother. Afterward, I drove to the old hardware store. The windows were dusty, the Carter's Tools sign hanging crooked. I stepped inside and inhaled the smell of wood, grease, and time. I remembered sitting behind the counter as a kid, pretending to sell nails to invisible customers while my dad fixed shelves and argued with suppliers on the phone. The place had a soul. I wasn't sure if I'd keep it or sell it. But it was mine now. News traveled quickly, as it always does in small towns. By the time I left the store, I had already received 2 texts, one from a former neighbor saying "good for you," and one from Emma. Her message was short. "You stole everything. I hope you're proud." I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message without replying. Later that night, I went through one of the boxes Mr. Holloway gave me: old documents, receipts, some of my father's notes. At the very bottom, tucked between bank statements, was a sealed envelope with my name on it. My heart skipped. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Julia. If you're reading this, then you know everything. You know I saw what happened, and that I didn't say a word when I should have. I wish I had stood up for you sooner. I wish I had told you I was proud of how you raised Ethan, alone, with strength and grace I never understood. This inheritance isn't a reward. It's an apology. And a hope that you'll use it for something that matters. Love, Dad." I folded the letter slowly. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Instead, I sat in that quiet room, feeling something warm for the first time in months. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Maybe peace. A few weeks passed. I returned to my town, to my small house where Ethan's memory lived in every room. But something inside me had changed. The inheritance didn't erase the pain, and it certainly didn't bring Ethan back, but it gave me space. Space to breathe. To imagine a future not defined by grief or abandonment. I didn't rush into anything. I sat with it all, the memories, the letter from my father, the silence from my mother and sister. I thought long and hard about what Ethan would have done, what he would have wanted. And then, one quiet morning, I opened my laptop and created the first outline for a scholarship fund, the Ethan Carter Memorial Scholarship, for young writers with big dreams. It would start small. 1 student a year. But it would grow. And every recipient would receive a copy of Ethan's favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird, with his name written inside the front cover. I contacted the local high school, explained the idea. The principal cried on the phone. He would have loved this, she said. At the same time, I began to go through the hardware store records. My father may have left it to me, but he hadn't exactly kept it thriving. Still, it had good bones. The same dusty shelves, the same bell on the door, the same smell of wood and oil and memory. I met with a young couple from town, 2 former students of mine, actually, who were looking to open a co-op hardware space. We want to bring the store back to life, they said. Make it useful again, something for the community. I liked the idea. So instead of selling it for profit, I offered them a partnership. It was never about the money, I said. It was about making sure this place meant something again. Every step forward felt like reclaiming a part of myself. The self I had lost in grief, and the self my family tried to erase by pretending Ethan never mattered. But he did. And I would make sure the world remembered him, not through revenge, but through purpose. My mother eventually called. Once. A short voicemail, I still don't understand why he did what he did. But I hope you're happy now. I didn't call back. Some silences are worth keeping. Emma posted a long paragraph on social media about being betrayed by your own blood and how money changes people. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The people who mattered saw me. The students, the neighbors, the ones who had shown up when it was hardest. And Ethan, he would have seen me too. One evening, as I placed the first scholarship envelope into the mail, I whispered to the quiet room, "You mattered. You still do." The air felt lighter. The pain still existed, I don't think it ever truly leaves, but it no longer controlled me. I had found my own version of joy again. Quiet, earned, and honest. Summer came quickly, with long golden evenings and the smell of cut grass in the air. Life had slowed, but in a comforting way, like I was finally walking at my own pace. For the first time in a long time, I didn't wake up with a pit in my stomach or go to sleep feeling forgotten. I had purpose. And that purpose was no longer tied to pain. The scholarship received over 100 applicants. Some from small towns, others from cities, but all of them with stories, raw, beautiful, hopeful. I read each essay carefully. I cried. I laughed. And when I picked the first recipient, a shy 17-year-old named Jordan who wrote about using poetry to process his father's death, it felt like honoring Ethan in the most honest way possible. I asked Jordan to come to the town for the award ceremony. Just a small event at the local library. We printed a banner. I baked cookies. I read one of Ethan's poems aloud before handing Jordan the envelope. He stood at the podium afterward and said, "This scholarship told me I wasn't invisible." And I felt something in my chest break open, in the best way. The hardware store was coming back to life, too. The young couple painted the walls, restocked shelves, and added a small section for community tools, things neighbors could borrow instead of buy. They called it the Carter Corner. I visited once a week, just to see people chatting by the counters, fixing things together, smiling. It wasn't just a store now. It was a meeting point. A space of connection. One afternoon, I found myself driving by my parents' old house again. It was empty, the curtains drawn, the porch still. I parked across the street and stared at it. I wasn't sure what I wanted, closure, maybe. Or just a moment of reflection. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. That chapter was closed. The truth was, I no longer felt angry. My mother and Emma had made their choices. They had revealed who they were when it mattered most. I had spent so long mourning their absence, trying to understand why they couldn't show up for me or for Ethan. But now I realized, not everyone is capable of giving the love we deserve. And that's not a reflection of our worth, it's a reflection of their limits. What mattered was the family I was building now. The students I mentored, the neighbors I helped, the small ways I showed up for people who needed to be seen. That was the kind of wealth I had learned to cherish, not money, not property, but presence. Integrity. Wisdom. And joy. Yes, real joy. The kind that comes in quiet waves. In the laughter of a young writer discovering their voice. In the sound of a community drill whirring back to life. In the silence of a kitchen where grief once screamed, now filled with peace. I wasn't healed. But I was healing. And that was enough. Autumn rolled in with crisp mornings and golden leaves, and I found myself walking more, not to escape, but to breathe. The world had changed shape around me. The sharp edges of my grief had softened, and in their place, something quieter had taken root, gratitude. One morning, while organizing a donation event at the library, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. My heart skipped as I opened it. It was from my mother. Julia. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve your attention. But I need you to know that I watched the video of your scholarship ceremony. Someone sent it to me. You looked strong. Ethan would have been proud. I was wrong. About so many things. About you. About him. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I can't undo that. But I wanted you to know that I do think of him. Every day. Love, Mom. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and set it inside a drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to respond. Maybe one day I would. But I had no interest in reopening wounds I had finally begun to heal. A week later, I visited Ethan's grave. I hadn't been in a while, not because I didn't care, but because his memory had become so deeply woven into my daily life that I didn't need a headstone to feel close to him. But that day, I brought something special, a framed photo of Jordan holding his scholarship letter, smiling like the world had just opened up to him. I placed it beside the grave and whispered, "You're still changing lives, my love." As I stood there, the wind picked up slightly, and for a moment, the world felt entirely still. Not empty, just full of meaning. Of presence. I looked around at the cemetery. So many names, so many stories. I realized then that the most powerful legacies aren't built on wealth or inheritance. They're built on compassion. On small, brave acts of love. On showing up even when no one else does. When I got back home, I sat down and wrote a short post for the scholarship's website. It said, "My son once told me that words can build worlds." I didn't understand that then. I do now. This fund exists because of him, and for every young person who feels unseen, unheard, or unloved. May you know your voice matters. And may you use it to build something beautiful. That night, I slept without nightmares. Without the weight of resentment or the ache of injustice. I dreamed of Ethan, not as the boy I lost, but as the light I carried forward. And for the first time since he died, I woke up smiling. Winter arrived quietly. The first snowfall came on a Sunday morning, blanketing the town in silence and light. I stood by my kitchen window, sipping coffee from Ethan's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle and faded quote that read, "One kind word can change someone's entire day." I had changed. Not just in the obvious ways, financially, logistically, professionally, but in the way I carried myself through the world. Grief had hollowed me out, but purpose had filled me back in. The scholarship grew faster than I expected. Donations started coming in from people I didn't even know. Former students, colleagues, strangers who had heard about Ethan's story. They all said the same thing, "Thank you for reminding us what really matters." On the anniversary of Ethan's death, I organized a community reading night. We called it Echoes of Ethan. Young writers from across the county came to share their stories and poems. The room was packed. I sat in the front row, heart wide open, as each teenager took the microphone and said the words they were afraid to say anywhere else. One boy shared a poem about losing his brother. Another girl read a story about growing up with nothing but books and silence. And then, Jordan, our first scholarship recipient, stepped up and read a letter he had written to Ethan. "You never met me, but you changed my life," he said. "Because of you, I write. Because of you, I believe someone like me belongs in this world. Your mom made sure of that. And I won't let her down." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Especially not mine. After the event, people hugged me. Thanked me. Not for the money, but for the message. For showing that even in the face of heartbreak, there could still be beauty. Still be meaning. Still be light. I walked home that night beneath a sky full of stars. The streets were quiet, the snow crunching under my boots. And I realized something simple but profound. All of this, was the legacy. Not the house. Not the business. Not even the scholarship itself. It was the impact. The ripple. The healing. I paused on my porch and looked up, letting the cold air sting my cheeks. I whispered, "We're okay now, Ethan. You can rest." Then I walked inside, not as the woman who had lost everything, but as the woman who chose to turn her pain into something that would outlive her. And if you're still here, still listening to my story, I want to leave you with this. Never underestimate the power of showing up. In someone's darkest hour, your presence, your kindness, can mean everything. Sometimes, all it takes to change a life, is to be the one who stayed. If this story moved you, help us keep these voices alive. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who might need it. Because sometimes, stories are the only thing strong enough to carry us through.